Imagine a lonely down in the middle of the ocean, so far from any continent that, for centuries, almost no one could reach it, and even fewer could leave. That's St. Helena, a British overseas territory that looks like it was placed on the map with one purpose only: to be isolated. We're talking about one of the most remote inhabited islands on the entire planet, surrounded by thousands of kilometers of open water in every direction. But what most people don't realize is that this extreme isolation turned St. Helena into something far beyond a simple island. It became one of the most feared and closely watched natural prisons in the world, a place where the British sent those who were never supposed to return: rebels, princes, sultans, and one of the most famous names in world history. Before we continue this journey through time and uncover the secrets of this mysterious island, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us immensely and ensures you won't miss any upcoming videos. All set? Then let's keep going. Close your eyes and picture the South Atlantic on a map. Right in the middle of that vast blue emptiness lies St. Helena, a place so distant it feels almost alone in the ocean. Geographically, it sits on a volcanic ridge in the South Atlantic and belongs to the British territory known as St. Helena, Ascension, and Tristan da Cunha. To give you a concrete idea of just how isolated it is, St. Helena is about 1,900 kilometers from the African coast near Angola and more than 3,000 kilometers from South America. In the era before modern aviation, these distances meant days, sometimes weeks, of sailing in open waters. Those numbers alone explain why the island became so unreachable. At the heart of the island is Jamestown, the capital and main harbor, a small town tucked into a narrow valley surrounded by steep cliffs. Historically, this was the main gateway for anyone arriving or leaving the island. Jamestown has always been St. Helena's fragile connection to the rest of the world. The island offers very few calm beaches or natural landings. Jamestown's harbor has always been the only truly safe point to dock. In many other areas, the cliffs and rough currents made landing dangerous, sometimes impossible. For a prisoner, escaping meant more than simply slipping past guards. It meant crossing hundreds of miles of open sea and somehow finding a ship willing to risk approaching the island. An extremely unlikely scenario. Without allies, without supplies, and with hostile waters ahead, attempting escape meant almost certain death. Unlike a fortress with walls, St. Helena's security system was the ocean itself, thousands of kilometers of water acting as an invisible barrier. There was no need for hundreds of guards along the coastline. Isolation did most of the work. For the British Empire, this combination of distance, difficult access, and a single control port made St. Helena the perfect solution. Send dangerous or influential prisoners somewhere they simply could not escape, while still keeping them under supervision. That's how the island stopped being on the map and became one of the most feared prisons of its time, a place where the ocean itself guarded the empire's secrets. Now that you understand where St. Helena is and why its isolation made it so dreaded, it's time to get to know the island's true face. Despite its size, every corner of St. Helena carries deep marks of volcanic origins, its unusual history, and its resilient inhabitants. St. Helena is a volcanic island shaped over millions of years, carved by eruptions that created dramatic cliffs, narrow valleys, and steep hills rising abruptly from the sea. From afar, it looks like a natural fortress. Massive rock walls that endured the passage of time and helped build its reputation as an inescapable place. Even though it is small, its dimensions become impressive when you consider just how far it is from everything. Only 122 square kilometers, roughly 17 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide. You can cross the island in a few hours and still feel like you're at the end of the world. At the center of this landscape sits Jamestown, founded in 1659, a colorful, historic town that seems frozen in time, nestled between cliffs like it was carefully placed there. The entire island is home to about 4,500 people, a close-knit community where everyone knows everyone, and stories are passed down like part of the island's own identity. And St. Helena isn't alone in its corner of the ocean. Along with Ascension Island and the Tristan da Cunha archipelago, it forms a single British overseas territory. 3 islands so far from everything and from one another that they once worked as a strategic network for the British Empire across the South Atlantic. The story of St. Helena begins long before it became a prison or a symbol of exile. It all started in 1502, when Portuguese navigator João de Nova spotted this lonely mass of land in the middle of the South Atlantic. For sailors of the time, finding such an isolated island was like stumbling upon an oasis in the desert, a place to rest, refill fresh water, and repair ships worn down by transcontinental voyages. The Portuguese built a small chapel and a few houses, a modest attempt at claiming the island, but no real settlement was formed. Maybe the isolation was too severe, maybe the logistics too difficult. In any case, St. Helena was left drifting, waiting to be claimed, and it was claimed. Throughout the 17th century, both Dutch and British forces fought over it, not for its beauty, but for its strategic value. During the age of great maritime routes, St. Helena was a crucial stop for ships sailing between Europe and Asia. Whoever controlled this island controlled one of the busiest crossroads of global trade. In 1659, the British Crown authorized the East India Company to settle and administer St. Helena, a decision that shaped centuries of history. What began as a small outpost would later become one of the empire's most significant sites. When the first Europeans arrived, they found a very different island from the one we know today. Imagine a place covered in dense forests, with unique species found nowhere else on Earth, a natural sanctuary untouched for millions of years. But the same isolation that preserved it for so long also made it extremely vulnerable. With European ships came goats, cattle, sheep, dogs, cats, rabbits, and rats. None of these species existed on the island before. They competed aggressively with the native flora and fauna. The result was devastating. Goats devoured vegetation, even on steep cliffs. Cattle trampled fertile areas. Rodents destroyed seeds before they could sprout. In a matter of decades, the once lush tropical forest disappeared. Some endemic trees, like the string tree and the St. Helena olive, went extinct. Coastal areas once green became barren rock, shaping the rugged landscape we see today. Yet, in the island's higher, wetter interior, nature still survives. Imported plants adapted over centuries, creating a strange mix of ecosystems. Parts of the island resemble a desert, while others feel like a cool, moist garden. By the 18th century, St. Helena had become a small but active society. In 1777, the island had around 1,200 inhabitants, nearly 700 of them enslaved people brought mainly from Africa. This reflects the island's role at the time, a strategic supply station for ships traveling across the Atlantic. Life on the island was a mix of hard work and ocean calm. Days began early, with laborers tending fields, livestock, and the steep paths connecting the island's settlements. Jamestown was the administrative and commercial heart, visited frequently by ships from Europe heading to Asia. In 1777, the island saw the creation of one of its most important symbols, St. James Church, the oldest Anglican church in the entire southern hemisphere. By then, St. Helena was remote, yet alive, complex, and full of contrasts. But long before the island became a prison for powerful leaders, before Napoleon ever set foot there, one man wrote the first chapter of that history. Fernão Lopes, the island's first permanent inhabitant. Lopes was a Portuguese soldier who, after being tortured for rebelling in India, chose to disappear from society. When his ship stopped at St. Helena in 1516, he asked to stay behind, alone. For more than 10 years, he survived in complete isolation, becoming a living legend among passing sailors. He eventually returned briefly to Portugal, But life among people no longer felt right. He came back to St. Helena, where he lived until his death in 1545, the island's first resident and its first prisoner. But the most famous prisoner of all would arrive centuries later. If there's one name that puts St. Helena on the global map, it's Napoleon Bonaparte. After escaping his first exile on Elba and returning to power for the famed 100 Days, Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo in 1815. The British knew they needed a place absolutely impossible to escape, distant, isolated, unreachable. They chose St. Helena. Napoleon was housed at the Briars and later at Longwood House, a remote and windswept residence where he lived under constant surveillance. British guards patrolled the island, monitored the roads, and controlled every visitor. There were no walls or chains. The ocean was his prison. For almost 6 years, Napoleon lived, wrote memoirs, walked under watch, and slowly grew ill. He died in 1821, buried under a simple tomb surrounded by trees. His body was later moved to France, but his presence forever tied St. Helena to world history. And Napoleon wasn't the only one. Other notable exiles included Prince Dinizulu of the Zulus, captured after resisting British expansion, exiled with loyal followers, eventually released and later recognized as a leader in Africa, Sultan Khalid bin Barghash of Zanzibar, exiled after the 38-minute war, the shortest conflict in history, arrived with his harem and servants, struggled to adapt, and was later transferred to the Seychelles. More than 6,000 Boer prisoners, sent during the Second Boer War, forming camps and small communities that deeply impacted the island. St. Helena wasn't just Napoleon's last home. It was a final stop for princes, sultans, warriors, and rebels who the British wanted far beyond the world's reach. And now that you've traveled through this remote and mysterious island with me, I want to know, had you ever heard of St. Helena before this video? Did you know it once functioned as one of the harshest natural prisons in the world? Do you know of any other prison islands with dark pasts? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you already knew and what you discovered today. And if you enjoy this kind of deep hidden history content, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next mysteries hidden around the world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story from the depths of history.